listening to the Pohu Experience.
Yo, the past 72 hours for me feel like a haze, feel like I was in a completely different world, which I guess in a way I kind of was. Diablo 4 early access weekend just ended. It was for 72 hours only. I think I played for a good 24 hours out of that 72. I literally cleared my whole schedule for the weekend just to try out Diablo 4. I think I got sucked into it because when I got my first character to level 20, I got an achievement, and it was an achievement for getting a character to level 20 during early access. Then I saw that the achievement looked like it had tier levels. It seemed like there was a level 2 and level 3, so I thought that meant I had to grind out the other two available characters to get that achievement, and for whatever reason, I really wanted it. I wanted it really badly, and so the grind started. I was in there for 24 hours out of the 72, and I had a couple of friends hit me up and ask, oh hey, how's early access so far? And my natural reaction was, it's alright, it's not bad, not the greatest, but it's not bad. But then when I think back about my answer, I realize, you know what, it's not bad, it's actually pretty good, and that's why I'm spending so much time in it. That's why I'm having so much fun with it. It's just, there are things that I expected differently. I expected a whole upgrade from Diablo 3 to Diablo 4, because I played a lot of Diablo 3, I played a lot of Diablo 2, and Diablo 2, you're talking about, that's in the 90s already. That's like when I was in middle and high school. And I guess that's why this franchise has a little soft spot in my heart, because it's kind of just nostalgic. It's kind of just reliving my old gaming days. But either way, it was really fun, and I'm going to give a full review here while it's fresh on my mind. If you're listening to this now, you have no idea what Diablo is, let me give you a quick breakdown. So Diablo is a game franchise. I think Diablo 1 came out in like 1996 or something. And the premise of the game is really simple. You get to choose a couple of classes when you start the game. Like this time in Diablo 4, our 5 main choices is Rogue, Sorcerer, Barbarian, Druid, and Necromancer. You choose one of them, you proceed with the story, and you go kill monsters and bad guys. You go into dungeons, kill a bunch of bad guys. Bad guys drop loot, drop gold, and drop gear. And with the gear, you make your character more and more powerful, and that's kind of the whole point of the game. Diablo is just one huge grind. The story, like, it's not the best. There's a lot of games that have better stories out there. Diablo 4 is about killing a lot of monsters, feeling super powerful, and collecting loot, trying to make your character as godlike as possible. I think that's the fun of it. The fun of it is kind of, it's almost like treasure hunting in a way, and you get to do it while feeling super powerful, killing demons, monsters, bandits, all kinds of different baddies in the world, and you're supposed to be this hero, and as you level up, you get more skills, you get more powerful moves and spells, and it's that kind of roller coaster ride. And for some people, that's like the game that they will play forever, right? They really take the game to like a min-max level, always trying out what's the best possible build there is for every class. I'm not like that. Usually Diablo games for me is I will spend a good 1-2 weeks, maybe 1 month on it, and get a couple of classes that I find interesting to maximum level, try to get the best gear possible, and then kind of just fall out of love with it. Because at the end, when you're really grinding for the best gear, especially if you're grinding for best gear in slot, meaning, you know, the best hands, the best legs, the best helmet, the best weapons, etc., it becomes really like a grind. Like you're repeating the exact same thing for hours and hours and hours, hoping for one specific thing to drop. And for me, that's where the fun starts to drown out, and I move on and play something else. And that's also why I prefer competitive games a lot more, because competitive games, it's never always the same thing. Every game is a little bit different. You use a little bit different tactics. Every game is a little bit different scenarios, and you know, it's playing with reflexes, decision making, all kinds of stuff. And so I always fall back to some form of competitive game because it's just a lot more RNG for me, and it gets my blood pumping. It makes me feel anxious, nervous, which is just a really alive feeling that I really enjoy. But anyway, back to reviewing Diablo 4, the early access. What are my first impressions of it? I feel that I'm a little bit disappointed because Diablo 3 and Diablo 4 don't feel much different at all. It feels like a remastered version of Diablo 3. Like there's a lot of new quality of life stuff added to it. Like there's more of a MMO aspect. Like you could see other characters running around on your screen. When Diablo 3, it's basically a single player unless you team up with another person you already know. Diablo 4 feels more like WoW or Final Fantasy 14, where there's just people running around doing their own thing. You could fight monsters together. You could just mind your own business. You could see where people died on the map and revive them. rhythm. It's not really a big change to the game, but it feels like a little bit of an upgrade. But what I feel disappointed is, if you game at all, right, and you've played games like Oblivion, Fallout 3, or Final Fantasy, you'll see that every single next game, there's a big improvement. It's still roughly the same structure of the previous game, but there's so many things that's improved. Like if you compare Oblivion to Skyrim, if you compare Fallout 3 to Fallout 4, or Final Fantasy 6 to 7, Final Fantasy 7 to 8, there's a huge difference. You're playing a completely different game. Diablo 3 to Diablo 4, I still feel it's kind of Diablo 3, or maybe that's props to Diablo 3. It's that great that there's really not much they could improve on, but I refuse to think that. It's Blizzard, it's a big company. I'm sure they could have really taken this to the next level, and I don't even know what next level would actually be. I just felt I was expecting way more, and it felt more like I was re-enjoying a Diablo 3 than, oh my god, this is a new game, this is all this new stuff, we're in 2023, what is this new world of gaming type of feeling. So that's where my disappointment's coming from, but actually the game is great. It didn't have much hiccups at all for early access. I mean, the usual on day one, there's all the disconnects, like the queues. I think luckily for me, either it's the time zone or the Asian servers, there just wasn't that much of a queue time. Like I saw a lot of streamers out there get disconnected and have to re-queue for 120 minutes, and that was the actual grind, right? The actual grind was trying to get into the game. For me, I had all those issues as well. I got disconnected mid-game, I got kicked out, I had login problems, but it was usually no more than 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I think the longest wait I had was a 1 hour. It just kept having errors again and again and again. It was hard to get in, but once I got in, everything was fine. I didn't get disconnected that much, and I'm super thankful for that, because all those early release hiccups really drive me insane. And I didn't exactly play at the moment of release, more like 8 hours later, because it released in my time midnight on Saturday. I think the day before that, I didn't get much sleep, so I was waiting. I was still up at midnight, but I couldn't go on. I knew that, oh man, if I try to log in now, even if I get in a game, I don't know what's going on. I need some decent sleep before I really tackle this game. And that's exactly what I did. I got 7-8 hours of sleep and, started grinding. In early access, you don't get access to the full game. We get to finish Act 1 of the story, which, knowing from previous Diablos, there's usually Act 5 or Act 6. Act 1 took about 4 hours for me to complete on my first character, and that's only because I was watching all the cinematics, I was reading all the text, the dialogue. After that, as I was playing with the second and third character, Act 1 was 1 to 2 hours max. It wasn't long at all. It was very easy to skip through. And I guess also I start to know the boss's patterns, so I'm killing the boss a lot faster as well. There are 5 total classes that you could choose from, but during early access this weekend, we only got to choose 3 of the 5. Next weekend will be open beta. You have access to all 5, which I plan to level up the 2 other classes that I didn't play all the way to max level, which max level is 25 for these early access times. I think when the game officially comes out, max level is level 50 or 60. And so this past weekend, what was available was Barbarian, Sorcerer, and Rogue. I started with the Barbarian thinking it's going to be OP like it was in Diablo 3 and Diablo 2. It's actually one of the weakest out of the 3. It's just melee just doesn't do well. Sorcerer feels very overpowered because of the range and all the spells that it has. Rogue is kind of in the middle of the 2. It's not as easy mode as Sorcerer, but way easier to play than Barbarian. The whole needing to get into range to deal damage, there's so much finesse that you have to do, and then you have to chase some of the enemies down that will run away from you once they get hit. Very annoying, and not something you have to deal with if you're playing a ranged rogue or a sorcerer. As for the story, I'm kind of indifferent from it. I won't say too much because I don't want to spoil it for you. It's still kind of cool to experience it for the first time. All I will say is, in my eyes, it feels unnecessarily gory. It's just a lot of violence, a lot of blood, and it feels unnecessary. You could have told the story without being that violent. And it might be just, I don't like gore. I'm okay with blood. I'm okay with most mainstream movie stuff. But once you start showing, a lot of guts, a lot of surgical stuff, the insides of a person or monster, I start to... Oh, I'd prefer if it wasn't there. And I felt the game a lot of times just had too much unnecessary details. At least I feel it's unnecessary. In the very beginning, this isn't a spoiler at all, but the very first cutscene, which you can watch on YouTube right now, it was part of their trailer before this early access. Your character is on a horse, your horse gets cut in half, and there's a scene where you see the horse's guts coming out and all this, and it's very detailed, right? This is very good graphics. You see all the bits and pieces, and it just made me feel, you didn't need to show me me that. I'm just here to pew pew and play Diablo. I don't want to see guts and stuff. But I guess they're going for a really dark theme, and it matches the theme, and I haven't seen anybody really complain about it except for me, so maybe it's just my intolerance for gore. But I will say this about the story so far, and we only have access to Act 1, so it might get a lot better later on. No idea there. But I do remember when I played Diablo 3 Act 1, I can still remember the emotions. Like, this is how strong Diablo 3 Act 1 was. I still remember how I felt playing that. You're so emotionally attached to it. There's the dread, there's the sadness. I still remember that feeling. I remember how that made me feel when I played it the first time, but I cannot, if you put a gun to my head, remember what happened in Diablo 3 Act 1. I kind of remember like somebody dies. That was very unexpected, but I don't remember the full context. I just remember feeling like, oh my God, this is peak storytelling. This is more than I could ever imagined. I can't say that for Diablo 4. Like Diablo 4 Act 1, it's not bad. I won't complain, but it didn't make me, like, if you see the cover, that's the Mother of Hatred, right? Supposedly that's supposed to be the Diablo, the big boss of Diablo 4, I think. And you see her in the game, she's referred to as the Horned Woman, the Mother of Hatred, and I'm just really indifferent. Like, I'm not afraid of her. She doesn't make my skin crawl. She does things, doesn't make me really want to get revenge on her. It's really indifferent, right? But in the game, they're painting her to be this super evil person, and I'm just like, I just want to pew pew, man. I just want to kill some monsters, get some gold, get some nice gear. I mean, you want to be the Mother of Hatred, good for you. I just didn't really find her that intimidating. And I mean, to be fair, Diablo isn't a game you play for story. Like, it really doesn't matter what the story is. You're going to play for it because you want the grind, because you want to get the good gear, because you want to see your character like do one move and everything on the screen just dies and becomes loot. Like, that's the point of Diablo. So, that's storyline. And as for gameplay, it's really nothing to complain about. If you've played anything like Diablo being a ARPG, action RPG, in the past, the more well-known ones, you had Lost Ark. If you play like Ragnarok Online back in the days, or even Maple Story to an extent. Maple Story is more 2D and Diablo's more 3D, but it's a very standard ARPG. Everything was really smooth. The UI, the UX, the way the game responds, there's really no complaints there. There weren't any big bugs. Everything worked really smoothly. My PC's like 2 to 3 years old already. I haven't upgraded any of the parts. I don't know what the graphics setting was, but it looked decently good. I wasn't having any frame drops. It ran really smoothly. It ran almost like a release game. And like I said, it's not much different than Diablo 2, Diablo 3. It's just like better graphics. There's not too much to comment on about gameplay. It is what a Diablo game is supposed to be. And I think all the elements were there. As for the difficulty, I gotta say props to the Blizzard team, because I think they nailed it on this one. When you first play the game, there's two difficulties. One is basically a newbie. If you're a newbie to ARPGs, enemies will be a little bit easier. You won't take as much as a punishment when you get hit. And then there's a second difficulty where for more veteran players, you will get more golden experience from killing enemies, but they hit you harder. You also hit them less hard. So it takes a little bit more finesse to kill enemies. Normal enemies, I feel it felt the same, but when it came to bosses, I felt it wasn't so hard that it frustrated me, but it wasn't so easy that I could just, pew 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 and it's dead. Like, you had to walk around, understand its pattern, not get hit, use your potions effectively. You had to do a little bit of planning to beat the bosses, which I found was quite refreshing. Like, it's unlike Elden Ring, right? When you play Elden Ring and it's your first time, I couldn't kill a normal mob the first time I played Elden Ring because I just didn't understand the controls, didn't understand the rhythm, didn't understand how the hell I'm supposed to kill things. In Diablo 4, I think they struck the perfect balance between, as somebody new, you still have a chance of winning. As somebody that's a veteran gamer that, has played games like this before, it's not so easy that you're going to be bored. So I'll give props to the Blizzard team for that. I think that's a very hard thing to do. It usually leans one way or the other. It's either too easy because they want all the newcomers to come and enjoy the game and not feel completely overwhelmed, or it's just so freaking hard and everybody fucking hates it because it's impossible to do, aka Elden Ring. But yeah, in terms of like graphics and soundtrack, I think it's okay. Like, I noticed the effort they put in a soundtrack, but again, I didn't really feel it. Kind of like how I feel about the Mother of Hatred, the main villain in the game. It's nice. It's not bad at all, but it's not something that I would really comment on. Like, it's nice that it's there. If it's not there, it wouldn't change my experience of the game at all. There are some games where you can't say that, like Final Fantasy Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy XIV. They're just some games that have soundtracks that are absolute bangers. This one, not so much. Graphics-wise, like I mentioned before, it's just decent. It's nothing too groundbreaking. I think the groundbreaking thing that some people were talking about was that in every cutscene, your customized character is a part of it, which I guess technology-wise is a big step forward, but it really doesn't affect my experience at all. Like, I'm not pumped when I see my character in the cutscenes. I mean, it's cool, but even if it's not there, not a big deal at all. But yeah, overall, I had a lot of fun. And I think the thing that I love about Diablo is it's one of those games where you're mindlessly grinding, but you could do something on the side. So like on Sunday, there was a big UFC fight. If I'm not wrong, it's UFC 286, Usman versus Edwards 3. And I was watching that on the side. Like I was playing Diablo and watching that. And because I was on my second character, I was just skipping all the dialogue and cinematics. I was just grinding. I was able to enjoy both of those things at the same time. And that's what I like about some games, right? Because if I'm playing like Apex Legends or I'm playing Hearthstone, which has a competitive element to it, I can't do something else. Like I'll put on a podcast while playing Apex. I have no idea what the podcast is talking about because I'm fully concentrated in the game. And yeah, so my weekend was very uneventful. I mean, it was all Diablo 4. That's all I did. I got every character to max level, thinking that I'll get the level 2, level 3 achievements. Did not get any of that. Even the level 1 one, I went back to look at my achievements. It suddenly said not started. So I don't even know if I really got the achievement or not, but I was grinding hard on all those 3 characters because I wanted that achievement. And it's a fun trophy to have. And I'm wondering, do I have to get the Necromancer and the Druid to max level as well this coming weekend to get that achievement? Well, we'll see. And I'm definitely playing this weekend as well. I will be getting Necromancer and Druid to max level. And I think it'll take me a lot less time. And once they're max level, I'm done. I'm done with the game because there's nothing more to do. I finished the story. I feel there's no point of gearing up because it's all going to get reset on release day. And in the past, knowing that all this would happen, that, I go in, put it a time and just kind of be completely done with it, I would think to myself, man, that's such a waste of time. But lately come to terms where, I think a big part of my life is just finding enjoyment in things. And as long as I'm enjoying it, it doesn't really matter. It's a one and done as long as I enjoyed my time during the playthrough of it. And so nowadays I'm very willing to put in the time into games that I really do want to play and experience. But then that also meant that I'm very choosy with the type of games I play now. I'm either playing a competitive game, which means sky's the limit. There's always ways to improve, right? And with competitive games, there's always patches and updates that you have to adapt to again and again and again. So it's never ending naturally. But for games that do have an ending, that do have a start to finish, I'm a lot more picky. And I think when Diablo 4 releases in June later on this year, I'll likely play it. I'll likely maybe pick up 2 or 3 classes, get them to maximum, or maybe just one. Maybe I'll use this time getting all the characters to 25 to really choose the one that I like and just go all in on one character and not waste time on the grind of getting it to max level and gearing it up again. But that's all the way in June. The other game I have my eyes on is the new Final Fantasy, and I think it's Final Fantasy 15, I want to say, 15 or 16, the one that's not released yet. Kind of have my eyes on that, but there's not much news on it, so no idea there. But anyway, that is my review to Diablo 4 so far during early access. I'll add on a little bit more the next episode when I play the open beta and get access to the Necromancer and Druid, but definitely so far so good. Usually I make a mental point to start off these podcasts with nutrition and food related things because most of you here know me for that kind of content, right? If I start talking about all the other stuff, I'm afraid I'm doing you guys a little bit of like a disservice, like a kind of bait and switch. But I couldn't help it this time because Diablo has just been so fresh on my mind. Like it literally feels like I just came back into reality. Like, oh, okay, weekend is over. I pushed all my responsibilities out for those 3 days. Now it's back to real life, back to normal responsibilities and back to making the podcast, making content and all that. But because it was so fresh on my mind, I just really wanted to get it out there first as the first thing to talk about for this episode. But now we'll go talk more about diet, fitness, and health. And today what I want to talk about is the vegan diet and its sustainability. And this is one of the requests I got when I was doing my Q&As over the weekend. And I was asking you for the next podcast episode, is there a particular topic that you want me to talk about? And this was one of them. It wasn't really a question. It was more like asking me to talk about vegan diet as a whole and whether it's sustainable or not. And I think it's a topic I could elaborate a lot on because I've been on the diet myself. I grew up in a culture where vegetarian veganism is quite normal, quite prominent. I think in Taiwan, there's a huge population of people that are vegetarian or vegan, and there's a lot of different types. Over here, mostly it's for religious reasons. Usually Buddhists here, in every 1st and 15th of the month, they will eat vegetarian, and that's not the normal calendar month. That's a Chinese calendar month. I think over here, being a vegetarian and a vegan, it's super viable. It's super sustainable because almost every place you go to will have a vegetarian vegan option, and it tastes actually pretty good. Like, I've been to some of the vegan restaurants here that if I wasn't told, I might not know that all of this was vegan. Like, I would legit think, oh my God, this steak was pretty good, but it's not real steak. It's like made of mushrooms and whatever. It's just, I think people over here put a lot of heart into vegetarian and vegan food. And I get to experience that here and there because I have some family members that are vegetarians. So when we go out to eat, we'll choose a vegetarian joint. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, this was pre-corona, like there was a vegan buffet that we went to, and it felt like just those like 5-star hotel buffets. The menu says all kinds of stuff like beef, prawns, fish, but it's actually not, right? It's all mock fish, mock beef, mock whatever. And the taste is just like, you really couldn't tell the difference. And I think that's such a high quality of life for vegan and vegetarians here, because in other countries, I've never really experienced that. I went through my phase of vegan and vegetarian mostly when I was living in Singapore and Jakarta. And in those areas, there's really a lot less options. Like, it was a lot easier for me to buy and prepare my own foods rather than go out and buy something ready-made. But also when I was on a vegan diet back then, it was a complete misconception, right? This was before I understood anything about weight loss. And I thought that to lose weight, you had to quit meat, because there was always the conversation like around my family and all that, say, oh, you want to go on a diet? Yeah, you should just go on vegetarian. And it was like just something that stuck in my head. I thought, oh, right. So if you quit eating meat, because meats have a lot of fats, if you're eating just veggies, there's a lot less chance for you to get fat. Like, that's just really misunderstanding what losing weight actually means. I don't know if I told the story before, but I do have a certificate on a plant-based diet. And the reason I took that course was I was on a vegan diet. I wanted to learn more about nutrition because I understood that without meat, I'm missing a lot of key vitamins and minerals, and protein is a lot harder to get. Like, there's no such thing as the equivalence of a pure chicken breast in a vegan diet. Pure chicken breast is pure protein. While in a vegan diet, most of your protein will come from a food that has both protein and carbs, or protein and fats, which means you have to calculate your calories a lot more differently. Like, the way to get protein on a vegan diet is to eat a big variety of foods that have protein included in them. While if you're not on a vegan diet, you just make sure you're eating enough like chicken breast or lean meats, you will hit your proteins really easily. And so I knew that, but I didn't really know all the little intricacies, and I Googled out. That was a time where I basically read everything about vegan diet in the first 10 pages of a Google search, like every question that I had. And every time that I was Googling, this course came up where, if you really want to learn about what a whole food plant-based diet is about, you can take our course and you can learn all about it here. And that's exactly what I did. I could care less about the certificate. I just wanted more info because Google's out. So I took the course and understood, all right, there are things that you have to watch out for on a vegan diet, like vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is literally a vitamin that you have no access through whole foods in a vegan diet. Vitamin B12 is usually in meat, and if you're eating meat, it's not even an issue. It's something you never have to worry about. But on a vegan diet, you will be deficient of vitamin B12 unless you take a B12 supplement. And I think that was like the straw that broke the camel's back for me, because I felt on a vegan diet, I was already making so much compromise that I felt that if I just ate meat, all these problems are solved. Like, why do I have all this extra complexity to be healthy on the things that I'm eating because I'm following a vegan diet? And I wasn't following a vegan diet because of ethical or religious reasons. I was following it because I thought it was better for health. I thought it was the best choice. And so throughout the course, I realized it's not. Like, the course is teaching me if I'm going to go down a plant-based diet life, these are things I have to watch out for. Totally possible if I wanted to. But if you're not married to the idea of being on a vegan diet, you could just eat a normal diet and have your diet become super simple to follow, super simple to keep up with, and much easier to sustain. And so after I took that course and got my certificate, that's when I decided, after I think almost a year of being on vegetarian and vegan, and even that time I even tried raw vegan, which is, I'll tell that story another time, so not worth it. But I tried all of it over that year, finished the course, got the certificate, and decided, you know what, fuck this. I'm going back to eating meat. This is not worth it for me. I'll be conscious of all the foods I'm eating and include the meat, and I have the best of both worlds. And that's kind of how I transitioned out of vegan into a normal diet. And so when the question is asking me about a vegan diet and its sustainability in everyday life, it definitely is, right? It definitely is sustainable, but you got to do a lot of homework if you really want to be healthy while on a vegan or vegetarian diet. Because on a normal diet, if I just tell you, hey, eat majority whole foods, fruits and veggies, eat your lean meat, try to go for like a macro ratio of like 20-30%, these are very rough numbers. But if you just kind of follow that rough guideline, you hit everything. You hit your protein goals, or at least get very close to it. You hit most of your vitamins and minerals, and you're just chill. You don't got to worry about anything. With vegan, it's like you got to make sure you're eating foods that have protein all the time, or not. It's very difficult to hit protein. You got to make sure you're eating a variety of different vegan foods, because you don't have the luxury of like a piece of meat where it has B12, iron, and all that. It's just full of nutrition. You don't have that in a vegan diet. So you got to make sure, are you choosing foods that have more iron to make sure you don't go into an iron deficiency, or are you taking iron supplements? And I think that was the thing that pissed me off, that made me transition out of vegan. It was that it was impossible to get vitamin B12 through foods alone. I think back then I was still in a very closed-minded mindset where I did not want to take any supplements. Like I wanted everything as natural as possible. I was still going through that phase, and knowing that the only way to make vegan viable is to take a supplement was like, this is completely pointless to me at this point. Like I work so hard and still have to take a supplement. But of course, I don't think that way anymore, right? Like I do have daily supplements that I'm taking now, and I'm taking openly and happily. I'm not against supplements anymore. But back then I just felt like, man, this sucks. This is stupid. So if I ate meat, I don't have to take supplements, then I'm going to eat meat. In my mind, it's like, at least meat is natural. Meat is more natural than a supplement. But yeah, that was back then. So after sharing all of that, I would say if you're going to go on a vegan, vegetarian, or, not eat meat, whatever your decision is, I think the number one thing that you have to ask yourself is why? Like, why are you not eating meat? Is it religious reasons? Is it ethical reasons? Or do you think it will help more in terms of health and weight loss? Because if it's ethical, if it's religious, I got nothing to say. You're choosing the way you live your life. I completely respect that, and just make sure you're watching out for the things that you need to watch out for your health. But if you're choosing a vegan diet, a vegetarian diet, because you think it's cool, or you think in some way it will help you lose weight faster, or in some way it's going to get you healthier, you're on the wrong track. You're on completely the wrong track. It's very easy to become nutrient deficient on a vegan diet unless you're really tracking your vitamins and minerals. And for fat loss, it really doesn't matter. Like you could so-called race against somebody that, you on a vegan diet and that guy's on just McDonald's, but if you're both on a calorie deficit, guess what? Both of you are going to lose fat. That's just the way fat loss works. Vegan diet is not superior to that. Just because you're not eating animal fat doesn't mean you're going to lose fat faster. Losing fat fast or slow, it depends on how consistent you are with your calorie deficit. That is it. And also realize that unless where you live, it's kind of like in Taiwan, where vegan, vegetarian options are super easy to access and not really a concern in terms of quality of life. You got to consider your quality of life as well, because if you're living in a place where, vegetarian, vegan food are hard to come by, there's not much options out there. Now your diet is also limiting like your social life. Like you might not be able to fully enjoy a birthday party because they don't serve vegan food, and the only reason you're not enjoying it because you chose to for a reason that is not true. Diets that are restrictive, that take away a whole category of something, right? Like vegan takes away meat, keto takes away carbs, paleo takes away processed foods. Like when you take away a whole category, you got to start thinking about quality of life, because the fact is you're able to include all of that and still be healthy and hit all of your goals. Of course, when there's medical reasons or ethical or religious reasons, like we can't argue with that. It is what it is, then you have to live that lifestyle. But if you don't have any of those things to consider, you really need to think about why you're restricting yourself, because it's not the road to better or faster results. Like why restrict yourself if you can get the same results without restricting yourself? That's what you got to consider. And I get everybody is different. Everybody has different kinks and quirks. But I think a lot of times we don't think it fully through. You just think, oh, this is the shortcut. If I just follow this will be good. And I was there too, right? That was the reason I was on a vegan diet, because I thought that would make me lose weight. That's what I needed to do to be healthy. And neither of those were true. So, something to really consider. For today's recipe breakdown, I'm going to go on and continue what we did last week was we broke down the McDonald's menu. And this week, I'm going to continue with the fast food chains. We're going to break down Burger King. And there's one thing I got to say about Burger King. Burger King is by far my favorite fast food burger joint. Like they taste different. I mean, they claim they're flame grilled and all that. I don't even know if that's true or false. All I know is it is absolutely delicious. Now, you probably don't hear me talk about Burger King a lot and McDonald's a lot more. It's actually simply for one reason. Burger King burgers just tend to be higher in calories and I just can't afford it. In terms of enjoyability, rather than get Burger King that I'll enjoy 90%, I'd rather get McDonald's that I enjoy 80%, but I can get like a lot more of because it's lower in calories. And the first example I'll give you is the Whopper. I love the Whopper. Whopper is good. Double Whopper, even better. But single Whopper is already 610 calories. 610. That's more than a Big Mac for a single Whopper. A double Whopper is 855 calories. It's so much. Like, remember the sausage McMuffin in McDonald's? It was like 300-400 calories, right? So I could literally have two of those for one double Whopper. Like, it's a huge difference. And the thing is, I don't feel Burger King burgers are that big. I could easily eat two double Whoppers. That's not a problem at all. But eating two double Whoppers, that's 1,007 calories right there. It's like, it feels like you're completely speed running calories in your day with Burger King. Now, I still enjoy Burger King, but more for like special occasions where I just don't give a crap about calories for that day. Because if I start counting with Burger King, it just never makes sense. It's just like, oh, I could go for Moss Burger. I could go for McDonald's. I could go for Pizza Hut. There's a lot of other fast food chains that are just a lot more calorie friendly. I mean, you look at it here, bacon double cheeseburger from Burger King, 440 calories. That's acceptable. I think that's okay. But the bacon double cheese XL, 925 calories. Or like the Steakhouse Angus, 792 calories. Classic cheese melt, 353 calories, kind of okay. A Whopper Jr. is 301 calories, which is kind of okay, but feels a bit too small for me. I guess my biggest gripe against Burger King is I love the Whopper, and the Whopper is the one burger that is just too high in calories. I mean, the classic cheese melt or the bacon double cheeseburger from Burger King are fine, but it's just not my favorite. So it's not something I would order for that amount of calories. I'd rather eat something else. But in my mind, on the tier list of fast food joints that are diet friendly, like Burger King is not very high on that list. It's definitely B or C tier at this point. I mean, we go to the chicken burgers. Crispy chicken burger from Burger King is 637 calories. If I remember correctly, McChicken in McDonald's is like 300 something calories, so half of that. And even the McCrispy was something like 400 or 500 calories, so still kind of a lot less. And the sizes are roughly the same, and I'd argue taste isn't that its preference at that point. It's not like, oh, this one is so much better. That's not true at all. Like the Chicken Royale in Burger King, which is like almost like the Subway shaped with the fried chicken in the middle, that one's 555 calories. The Subway that I'm having, the teriyaki chicken, that's 320 calories. I literally could have a foot long. That's roughly one Chicken Royale. It's like, oh, the numbers just don't add up. Oh, come on, Burger King. Like, I know there's not much I can do about it. It probably tastes so good because there's those numbers, but you know, sometimes I do wish there's a way to fit it in a little bit easier. Now for Burger King nuggets, which in my eyes aren't the greatest. If I were to compare McNuggets and Burger King nuggets, 100% go for McNuggets. But here's also the good news. Calories are roughly the same. It's about 40 calories per nugget. And Burger King, I remember, was one of the first places that has like a vegan or vegetarian version, like a mock meat version of their burgers. Like there's a plant-based Whopper. And I think that depends on where you're living, but there's always at least one burger that's like vegetarian. The amount of calories in that vegetarian burger, it's roughly the same in equivalent to the meat version. So in other words, like the plant-based Whopper is 528 calories. The normal Whopper is 610. So you're talking about roughly like 70 calorie difference, which I wouldn't say is the biggest difference. It's not that different at all. Even if you're a vegetarian or vegan and you're going to Burger King to order your, plant-based burger, realize that it's still a lot of calories as well. Just because it's plant-based doesn't mean it's less in calories. That was one of the biggest misconceptions I had when I was on a vegan diet. I thought, just eat whatever I want. Just eat as much French fries as I want, which if I wasn't a vegan, I wouldn't eat that much French fries because I have other choices for food. But because I was a vegan, I didn't really have much choice, and French fries was one of the few things I could enjoy that was still like considered, air quotes, regular food. But yeah, that's basically the menu of Burger Burger King because they don't really have any staple breakfast stuff like McDonald's does. Like I know they have breakfast, but I think for every country it's a little bit different. So I won't go through that. I think I can count on my fingers how many times I had Burger King breakfast, and that's probably 2. Both those times I think I had it at Singapore, and both those times it was a full night out of partying, sun's coming up, kind of hungry, don't know what to get, and Burger King is the only 24-hour joint around my area. I don't even remember how it tastes. It probably tastes amazing because after a lot of alcohol, after being tired, a good greasy sandwich is probably what I was looking for. But yeah, that is the recipe breakdown for this week, and we'll continue this fast food chain breakdown. So, when you are out and about and you want to enjoy some fast food, you know that you have choices that won't ruin your diet. You are choices that you can still enjoy some of these burgers and still be in a calorie deficit. Remember, one of the keys is to not get the meals. The meals is usually what gets you in trouble because they'll ask you for an upsize. And if you're not drinking like a 0-calorie drink or, you're eating a large fries, that in itself is almost like, 800 calories if you're not careful. But if you're just having one burger or just 6-piece nuggets, you could easily control that to be somewhere in the vicinity of like 300-400 calories. And that could easily fit into whatever diet you're on. That's not a problem at all. So I was contemplating on whether I want to talk about this on a podcast or not, but I thought I want the podcast to be somewhere where I either can just keep you up with the news, give you some of my thoughts on, world events. And because of that, I thought, I might as well talk about it. Even though this topic, I currently don't have a lot of thoughts, I just think it's really relevant to the world we're living in right now. And you might have missed it if you don't really keep up with world news or financial news. So over the past week, the US just had like their 3rd biggest bank failures. Like 3 banks failed, and failed is different than like going bankrupt, right? They didn't go bankrupt. They didn't lose all their money, though a lot of people think that that's what happened. The bank failing basically means it has a lot of red flags and the government kind of took over like, yo, we'll take it from here. You're obviously really struggling, don't know what you're doing. And to make sure everything doesn't completely collapse, we are taking over. So that's what happened to these banks that are so-called failing. The 3 banks are banks in America, and it's likely banks that you haven't touched, and it's also very likely this doesn't affect you at all, really, at this point. The domino effects that come from this, I don't know. But the immediate effects from this, I think the majority of us are just not affected at all. And the 3 banks that failed is Silicon Valley Bank, Silvergate Bank, and Signature Bank. Silvergate and Signature Bank are kind of known as crypto banks. They deal with a lot of crypto. So it's kind of understandable that crypto's not doing well. They kind of struggled as well. Silicon Valley Bank, on the other hand, was not a crypto bank. It's a very normal bank. It's a bank a lot of startups turn to, and big companies like Roblox, Roku, BlockFi have a big chunk of their cash in Silicon Valley Bank. And how the banks failed was kind of just the natural next event on how the world is functioning right now. And let me explain that, right? Just a quick crash course. Like how a bank works is when you put money in a bank, the bank doesn't just leave it there. It will take your money and invest it in something else, right? So if you put $1 million into the bank will take that $1 million and likely a percentage of it, maybe 20%, maybe 50%. They will go and invest in something themselves so that it's not just cash doing nothing in their pockets. And this is very normal. That's how banks make money. They need to make money as well. And usually there's a threshold, right? There are rules that every bank has to have this amount of cash available at all times. So when customers want to do withdrawals, they have the cash to let them do withdrawals. That's just normal SOP of a bank. So what happened was Silicon Valley Bank, they bought a lot of treasury bonds with their deposits. Now, treasury bonds are one of the safest investments out there. It's usually issued by the government. It's like a 10-year or a 5-year thing where you just leave the money in there and you earn like 1%, 2% every year. Not a high yield, but very safe. So they bought a big chunk of treasury bonds, which isn't something corrupt. It's a very normal thing for banks to do. That's all totally fine. But what got them in trouble was these days you see the news, a lot of companies are having layoffs, a lot of companies are making a lot of changes. So they've been needing a lot of cash. So they've been withdrawing more than usual to the point where Silicon Valley Bank didn't have enough cash to meet the demands of the withdrawals. And so to meet the demands, they have to sell off some of their investments. Now, the problem is currently interest rates are at record levels high compared to the past 5 years, which means the price of their treasury bonds would have dropped, meaning that if they were to sell their treasury bonds now for cash, they're making a huge loss. Whereas if they kept their treasury bonds to maturity, they get their principal back plus all the interest that they earned. But they don't have a choice, right? They don't have enough cash because all their customers are withdrawing so fast. And I think the story goes, they did sell off some of their bonds to meet the demands of the withdrawals. And then after that, they started to try to fundraise because they just didn't have enough cash on hand. And that kind of started the alert bells on a lot of their customers thinking like, whoa, why is a bank starting to fundraise? Is there something fishy going on here? Are you in trouble? Like, why do you suddenly need to raise funds? And so customers withdrew even more cash to the point where Silicon Valley just couldn't meet the demands and was about to go under. And that's where the Federal Reserve, the government was like, oh, okay, stop it right there. You guys are obviously failing, to the point where rules and regulations allow the Federal Reserve to come in and to so-called take over and make decisions for them instead. And so I think a lot of people didn't follow up with the story and thought that, okay, Silicon Valley Bank went down, which means like, Roblox lost hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank and all that. That's not true at all. After the Federal Reserve came in, they gave a date, the next 5 days. They said all people that have their money in Silicon Valley Bank, you still have access to all of your cash and you can do what you please with it. None of it is lost. Silicon Valley Bank was illiquid, but not insolvent. Illiquid could lead to insolvency, but that wasn't the case yet. So it wasn't exactly a crash. This is not like FTX, right? FTX was insolvent because it was playing with money it didn't have. Like FTX doesn't have the money to give back to all the investors. While Silicon Valley Bank still has all the cash, they're just not very good at managing it, but the government stepped in, and so kind of all is well. Of course, all is not well. The fact that it got into this point, the fact that a really big bank that, big companies have putting their money in has failed to this level. I think this is a huge step one. For the past couple of days, I haven't been able to really connect the dots on how it'll affect the rest of us, but I'm certain it will in some shape or form because this is too big. It's just like the whole FTX's failure basically killed the crypto and NFT space. The level of trust in NFTs and crypto is at a record low now after FTX's failures. And I think that's a big change, even if you don't deal in NFT and crypto. It's a whole industry that has, for the time being, is not relevant anymore. And these banks failing, I feel, is almost like a premise to maybe there are going to be more banks that fail. And while these banks don't affect most of us directly, what if one of the big ones do fail and it does affect us directly? And then I also start to think about so what are some, measures that you could take first to be safe from all of this? And so far, my conclusion is there isn't really anything you can do. Anything you do right now is really just going into bunker mentality, right? Building a bunker, stocking up on food and guns in case of war. And I feel that's where we are right now with the bank failure and what you should do about it. I don't think there's anything you should do about it, but I think it's good to know. It's good to know about these things, especially if you're into, finance, or especially if you're running a business. I think all I can say is I think change is coming. There's going to be a lot of change, and it won't be change you can't get through, but there's a lot of things that we might have to do differently in the future. And I know that sounds so vague and so kumbaya, trying to be wise, but that's just kind of my thought process right now. And I thought I'd talk about the bank failures and all that because I realized a lot of people didn't really understand what was going on. It sounded really scary, but this was nothing like the Lehman Brothers in 2008. This is nothing like FTX is failing. It's still bad, but it's not that bad. There's probably more to come, but so far it's kind of okay, I think. But yeah, that wraps up this week's episode. I don't know how the schedule is going to be for this podcast in the coming weeks. In order for me to keep the topics fresh and to be on as close to a weekly episode as possible, I might need to take some weeks off. I don't think I can hit 52 weeks of the year, but I think I can hit 50. And that's just because I realized if I'm going to take time off and kind of enjoy life, like the Diablo early access and all that, that's time I can't really afford to lose if I'm going to hit, 52 episodes in 1 year of the podcast, because that just took away 24 hours of working time, which is a lot in terms of an episode, all the time that I could be editing and all that. But then also don't really want to miss out on Diablo's early access and the launch and all that. And I'm sure there are going to be things I care about in the future that I want to join, I want to be a part of, and I might have to dedicate time for it, or perhaps if I go on vacation and all that. But as I was doing the calculations in terms of my schedule, I realized it's actually not so bad. I think 50 episodes a year is still manageable, but 52, that's where I could, but that would mean sacrificing sleep, sacrificing, a lot of things. And do I want to do that? I don't know. I don't know. And I just wanted to share that with you because that's on my mind after the Diablo week. I felt like, fuck, man, this has been a long time since I just turned my phone silent, didn't reply to messages. I still did the Q&As before going to bed on those days, but you could see it was like a lot less answers because I was just grinding and sleeping. Like I was even just, ordering Uber Eats and eating it in front of my computer. That was my weekend. My weekend was pure Diablo 4. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this episode. I will give you an update on Diablo 4 next week. And any questions or any topics that you want me to just elaborate and ramble and babble about, let me know, right? Message me, DM me, email me. You know how to contact me. Just let me know. I'd love to talk about it. Like I'm 100% a babble mouth. Like I talk a lot and I could talk a lot about a lot of subjects. So let me know and I will see you in the next one. Peace.